Hi, my name's Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Fantasia on a Theme by Tallis by Vaughan. And I'd like to go through this very famous work, seeing how it's put together, because I do believe that having some understanding of form and structure, particularly in classical music, can really aid our appreciation and enjoyment of it. Now, Vaughan composed this piece between 1909 and 1910. It was premiered in Gloucester Cathedral in September the 10th, 1910, as part of the Three Choirs Festival, along with Elgar's Dream of Gerontius. And Vaughan Williams's Fantasia created quite a stir, particularly amongst two young composers, Ivor Gurney and Herbert Howells, who were said to have walked the streets of Gloucester all night, completely entranced by this new sound world Vaughan seemed to have conjured up, this bridge between ancient and new. But it was based on a tune he'd heard probably while he was editing the English hymnal in 1906 by the great English composer from the 16th century, Thomas Tallis. And this tune, he discovered, was written for the first Archbishop of Canterbury, Matthew Parker, in 1567, and it's based on the second psalm from the Bible. And it's to be sung in English. Of course, Tallis lived in a time of enormous religious upheaval. He started writing with Henry VIII, in Latin, and then Edward VI came and everything was Protestant, so he started writing in English with a clearer vocal line. And then Mary I came to the throne, back to Catholicism, and then Elizabeth I, who really helped formulate Anglicanism. And Thomas Tallis lived through all that time. He was a Catholic all of his life, but he must have been hugely respected by each of the monarchs to keep writing and to be secure in his life, which must have been perilous for many Catholics and Protestants, actually. Anyway, he wrote this tune for the Psalter, and it goes like this. Why fume thin fight, the Gentiles spite, in fury raging stout? Why take thin hand, the people fond, vain things to bring about? The kings arise, the lords devise, in councils met thereto, against the Lord with foes accord, against his Christ they go. Very lovely and moving melody based on the Phrygian mode, and therefore has that rather ancient feel to it. Vaughan took this beautiful melody and he uses it memorably right at the beginning of his Fantasia and at the end as well. And he alludes to it throughout this piece. Now, before we look at the piece itself, Vaughan wrote this for string orchestra, but he also, within this orchestra, scored music for a second smaller orchestra, which is basically the first desk of each of the sections. And on top of that, there are some passages for string quartets, the principals of each of the sections in the orchestra. And sometimes, if you hear this performed live, I did recently in the Royal Festival Hall, and the smaller orchestra was up in a box and it had this wonderful antiphonal effect. And it must have been magical to hear it in Gloucester Cathedral in the premiere, with the kind of reverberation in that ancient building and the sheer weight of history and spirituality in that place behind the music as well. And indeed, you can actually see a performance in Gloucester Cathedral, I think for the 100th anniversary of the piece, on YouTube. So please look that up, conducted by Andrew Davis. It's a lovely performance. So let's look at the music itself. The Fantasia begins with this introduction on these beautiful chords, these descending chords with a rising bass line like this. And it's as if there's a veil coming down. It's really beautiful, like this. Then we hear the beginnings of that Thomas Tallis theme. Eventually, this beautifully miraculous introduction takes us to the main theme, the Thomas Tallis theme, stated in full. So on. And then when we go to this emotional climax, when it's taken up an octave. And so on. Really beautiful. It's such a wonderful opening to this piece. Really moving. Used, of course, in countless films. You might have seen Master and Commander, that Russell Crowe film, and when they're burying the dead in that film on board the ship, they play this music very movingly. Just a word on the chords underneath. There's this ambiguity between major and minor throughout this melody, which Vaughan Williams really appreciates. We hear this, G minor, hear that between G minor and G major. And there's also these wonderful string writing underneath that melody. We have, you know, in the, I think it's the second violins. There's like these wonderful arpeggios underneath. It really gives this radiant quality to this music. Eventually we have this mysterious closing to this A section, and that takes us to a B section which has which is really a development of what we've heard so far. It begins like this. Then we have this process of the Tallis tune, but also those introductory chords being taken apart and developed. Then in section C we have this new idea, played first of all on the solo viola. And so on. And then eventually the other, the solo violin comes in as well. there's this a very folky feel to this, and it sounds a bit like birdsong as well, the way the different solo instruments come in. There's this dialogue between each of the principal players of the string quartet within the larger orchestration. One thing to note about this new melody in this piece is it contains a motif which is identical from the Tallis tune. That bit. Da, 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 da. If you remember, those notes are in the original Tallis theme. In this new tune, it does like this. So it's very similar, and I think this is intentional. It gives the piece a sense of unity. It's almost as if the two tunes are related somehow, and this is their family resemblance, that short motif. Eventually we get to another kind of development section. When I say development section, I'm not talking like a development in a symphony. It's far more, fantasy-like, far more free, I suppose. You know, this is a Fantasia after all. And ideas are kind of floated throughout all three ensembles, the large orchestra, the smaller orchestra, and the soloists in quite marvellous ways. And we hear glimpses of the Tallis tune, this new folky tune, the introduction, and we get to this wonderful climax in this section. Then we hit this incredible climax where we hear that motif which links the two melodies, that da 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 da, that dotted idea, before we have this statement of that folk tune, a second tune, almost in a unison. It's like this. So on. It's a real heart-wrenching climax, and then the music dies down, ebbs away. We hit this wonderful transition, which is one of my favourite parts of this piece of music. We hear this, which is reminiscent of the first few notes of the Tallis tune. I love the way those chords just descend and drop. There's something really mysterious, odd and strange and beautiful about them. Again, going back to the modality of this piece. Then we have a reprise of the Tallis melody for one last time. And the piece ends beautifully on that Tallis theme, which has formed the basis of so much of this piece of music. And we end quite marvellously on a tierce de Picardy on a G major chord. I'd like to thank Sir Dan for suggesting this piece for me to look at. If this video is your kind of thing, please click like and subscribe. And if you have any more suggestions for pieces you'd like me to look at, please put them in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Bye.